Hi guys, welcome to lesson 2. Today we'll be learning how to label important diagrams that will be needed for exams and tests. These diagrams include the long bone and the general skeleton. We'll also be mentioning the divisions within a skeleton. Let's begin by discussing the long bone. The long bone is the most common type of bone in the skeleton. It can be divided into two sections, the head and the shaft. The head are the ends of the bone and the shaft is the middle section. The head is made up of spongy bone. Spongy bone is bone that contains holes inside, which allows it to be less dense and therefore lightweight. This is necessary because the bones are needed to be tugged and pulled on in order to generate movement. And if the bone was too heavy, then this wouldn't be possible. Next, we have the periosteum. The periosteum is a tough outer layer of the bone that protects it. In the center, we have the bone marrow. The bone marrow contains a lot of fat, which also contains nutrients, which is needed for the health of the bone. Now we have the compact bone, which is the opposite of the spongy bone. It makes up the rest of the bone, and it makes up the majority of it. The compact bone is dense and hard, and contributes to the strength of the bone to make sure that it's not too fragile. In the head, we also have the red bone marrow. The red bone marrow are these red dots over here, and they produce red blood cells, which is essential for our body. The cartilage is this blue area around the bone. Essentially, the cartilage cushions and reduces friction. This is extremely necessary at joints because joints are where two bones interact with each other. Without this cartilage, the bones would be at risk of extreme damage because there would be no protection between the bones. First, we have the axial. The axial tends to relate to parts of the skeleton that are more centered, such as the skull, the vertebrae, and the ribs. Next, appendicular, bones of the skeleton that are more outwards, such as the arms, the legs, and the pelvis. The general skeleton diagram is one of the most important diagrams you'll be needing. First, let's start from the top. This area over here is called the skull, and the scientific name of that would be the cranium. It's important that you know both the English name and scientific name of each bone in the skeleton. Next, we have the jaw, which would just be called the mandible. And over here, this orange line would just be called the collarbone, which is clavicle. Next, we have this green area over here, which is the breastbone and called the sternum. Over here, you can see this is the ribs, and the scientific name is also just ribs. Over here, there's a triangular-like bone that isn't visible in this diagram. However, that would be called the shoulder blade, and that's called the scapula. The upper arm bone is the humerus. And then in the lower arm, it's made up of two sections, the ulna and the radius. So the scientific name of the forearm would consist of both of these names, the radius and the ulna. The wrist over here is just called carpals, and the fingers, which should be easy to remember because of the name of the wrist, is just metacarpals. Over here is the thigh bone, which is called the femur. Here's the kneecap, and it would be called the patella. The lower leg is made up of two bones, just like the forearm. However, it's made up of two separate names. The front bone over here is called the shin bone, and the back bone is called the calf bone. The shin bone would be called tibia, and the calf bone would be called fibula. The ankles would be called tarsals, and the toes/finger toes would be called phalanges.